Good afternoon. Today's episode of Lemonade is dedicated to you, Amy Peck, CEO of Endeavor VR, VR consultant, AR consultant, investor advisor, and very interesting character for our ecosystem and I think worldwide ecosystem of startups. Welcome. So how are you? How has it been? What's going on in your life?
Well, I'm here now for, I think it's the 5th time. We're actually here at Tech Park. So we work with GITA and the Matching Grants program.
Right.
So we run a workshop where it's a very intense 6-day program
Been there,
for startups.
done that. Yeah.
Yes, right? So, and you know how mean we are.
Yes. Well, in a good way.
In a good way. We try and be positive.
I think that's the best thing you can do for a startup.
We have to be tough.
Yeah.
Though we have to be tough. But it's a great program. So we have about 40. I think we had 41 this time, and they're going to be going to Batumi in 2 weeks to do their pitches for the VCs who are going to be coming sort of drips and drabs this week. And then about 20 of them are going to get 100,000 lari to,
as a grant.
To start their companies.
This brings up so much memories. Yeah. So how is the life different for you in terms of these tough times? You know, in terms of the world pandemic, the changes we all had to sustain and go through in 2020 and 2021. So how is it like? How is it for you?
It was. It's interesting because I look at all of these things. It was a great tragedy, and people suffered and people died.
Right.
But it was also an opportunity for us on so many levels. Certainly in technology and leveraging technology, not only to actually help us kind of find these drugs and using AI to be able to look at to kind of rapidly iterate on formulations. But then also, VR, as you know, is an amazing vehicle for allowing us to stay connected. So you and I could be on, opposite ends of the earth, which we are, most of the year.
Yes.
But yet we could meet in a virtual environment and we could work together, or we could just hang out, or we could listen to music, or we could, work on a whiteboard. Yeah. So I think the interest in immersive technology, really kind of spiked. And then the last component, and part of it I'm happy about, and part of it I'm a little disappointed. It really offered us an opportunity to act globally, right? To really kind of look at, what is humanity, and have us remember that we are part of this global village.
And finally start thinking holistically about humanity and not the...
Yes, and I think on the one hand, I think there were some very good and positive things that came out of it, and on the other hand, I think a lot of kind of petty, some of the negative.
Yeah, we kind of failed at it.
Well, it wasn't spectacular. Yeah. Let's put it that way. But I think now we have this data set about how we as a globe reacted, and that's the key word is reacted. We had to react to this unseen enemy. And what we missed, and I think what we've been missing even, pre-pandemic, is the fact that we have forgotten that we have agency in building what the future looks like. And I'm a big believer in, instead of trying to predict where technology is going to go and then how do we react to it, is why don't we build the vision?
Be proactive, yeah.
Yeah, but let's build the vision of this future and then use technology to help us get there. And yes, that's a very idealistic and simplified view.
But now more than ever, there is a chance to actually do it.
Exactly.
I mean, almost anyone in the world can actually create their own technology right now. Like it has never been a better time for this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? 100 years ago, you couldn't even dream, and now everybody can be potentially a Nikola Tesla. You know what I mean? Like everybody can do it.
Exactly.
Because there is everything you need to be a creator of something spectacular. So did it disrupt your life?
A little bit. I was living in Northern California, actually in Sausalito, just north of San Francisco at the time. So it's a hard place to be depressed.
It is.
Because even if you're, kind of stuck, right, and you can't really go anywhere, you just go out for a walk and you're in one of the most...
There are worse places to be stuck in.
It's one of those beautiful places in the world. But in the middle of it, and I did actually come back here in the middle of COVID. I was here in February because we wanted to make sure that we had so much momentum doing these programs twice a year that we didn't want to miss the opportunity. Yeah. So we decided to come and we put some protections in place so we could be here. So I was actually able to travel a little bit. Yes, it was less. Yes, it was hard. But I can't say that it didn't really hit me until I moved my office and was to Texas, to Austin, Texas, which is a really fun place. But I realized like all the times I was there, it was still locked down. It was very similar, but I just didn't know anybody there. So, you know, I think even though I wasn't seeing many people, just knowing that people are there, and that goes back to immersive, like the immersive alt space took off and VR chat. And, you know, so if I got depressed, I could just put on my, you know, my Quest 2 and, you know, go in, I could play some Beat Saber, I could challenge some friends. I want to win, so very competitive, or go into alt space and watch a show. So I think, you know, that part of it, that made it a little bit easier.
A little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so we have a long ride in front of us, but before that, let's just go to the beginning and where it all began. Where were you born? When were you born?
Wow, I was born, I think before the wheel was invented. It was a long time ago now. And I was actually born in, weirdly, Detroit, Michigan, because that's where my mother happened to be at the time. Although we grew up in Florida and New York, so part of the time in New York and part of the time in Florida. And then when I became school age, we had to kind of pick a place, so we decided Florida. But I'm definitely an East Coast person. And I got into tech very late. So I got into tech kind of after I had kids. Although, having said that, I was in the music business for a long time. I was in...
well, it makes sense you were born in Detroit.
Well, yes. But, you know, there's no family there. It's not like there's a connection. It's just she happened to be there, and the doctor said, you need bed rest now. And so she's like, oh, no. I have to be in Detroit.
Music business.
Yeah, and I moved to the UK. I've lived in Tokyo. So I am a curious person. And so I've never stayed in one career. As soon as I feel like I'm at a high level in a particular industry, I want to move on to something else and continually challenge myself. And about 8 years ago, I think it's 8 years ago now, a friend of mine went to go work for a company called Leap Motion, which I'm sure you know, but it looked like a tiny iPhone, and it was a USB, and you'd plug it into your laptop, and then you could control your computer with your hands. And I thought, okay, this is very cool. And so he put me in touch with the VCs who had invested, because they were interested in taking this technology, not for consumers, but how could you use this in enterprise? And they said, you know, would you be interested in moving to San Francisco from New York at that time, and you know, kind of run this enterprise division? And I thought, yeah, let's give it a try. And I didn't know anything about the technology at all, because it was a new product. It had just been released.
But you were into VR at that time, or
well, no, I sort of knew about VR, but I wasn't into it at all. And this was like the first kind of pure play tech. I had been at a company that was acquired by JP Chase that was essentially a data product. So it was leveraging AI to move from consumer personas to like individual personas based on credit card spending. And then the idea was to kind of package up really individualized messaging from the commercial banking clients on the JP side. And so the problem was, as a financial institution, they couldn't do it. So I spent a very long time talking to compliance attorneys, which I'm sorry, I don't recommend. It's not exciting. And so that's what kind of prompted me to look around and see, okay, what else is out there? I didn't know anything about the Leap Motion technology, but yet I had to kind of explain it to these enterprise customers. So I had them move me from the business side, and we had kind of this like pretend wall in the office, and all the engineers were on the other side. And so I had them move my desk right in the middle of all of them, and they were
in the epicenter of technology.
And they were horrified, because here I am, like a fast-talking New Yorker, and I'm trying to learn the technology. So I used to just like write things on a legal pad, and I'd be like, "What's the latency?" ? And they'd go like 0.01. I'd be like, "Yeah, the latency is only 0.01." But that was the only way I could learn the technology, was just listening to them, doing their work. And it was actually, frankly, it was more fun on the developer side, because you'd be sitting at your desk and then all of a sudden like a drone would like come and like hover in your face and you'd look around and they'd be like cracking up over there. Like it was fun. Like we were playing with things, we were breaking things. And then so one day they decided to duct tape a Leap Motion. It was right when the first DK1, which was like a brick for your face. It came out and they duct taped it, and one of the developers that we used to work with, called Chaotic Moon, built a game called Shark Punch. Right. Which is exactly as it sounds. But what was amazing, it was like I was in this 3D environment, and because we had the Leap Motion, I could see
you could interact with stuff.
Yeah, and I could like, these sharks would be coming out and I would just be like, and it looked very funny to anybody else because you have this brick on your face and you're like, flailing around the middle of the office. But I really quickly drew a line. I was like, this is fun, I get this, but this isn't what I care about.
The business is gonna use the hell out of this.
Yeah, like healthcare, education. I was just like, my mind was reeling. And so I started to really focus on that combination of VR, with the hand tracking and the interactions. And I stayed with Leap Motion for about 2 years, but they really just wanted to be in games and do, have sort of a consumer presence. And so, with everybody's blessing, I left and we're all friends. But I decided to, actually jump off into the abyss of consulting is what I call it, because you just jump off the cliff and you hope the parachute opens.
Yeah, that's so surreal. I mean, exactly at that time, we here were beginning the journey of VREX, and we were trying to get our hands on the development kits of
hard here.
And the DK ones and the the Leap Motion. It was interesting, and now I'm here sitting down and talking to you. So what kind of a kid were you? Like, what were you into?
I was a little bit of a tomboy, so I was definitely, I love sports. I played tennis, I played soccer, I played softball. I was always outside, sort of running around. I definitely was in the principal's office a lot, but I was really good at school. Like I understood, I kind of looked at it and was like, all right, like this is what I need to do. And it's all kind of stupid, but like if I just do these things, then I can kind of get away with all the other shenanigans. And so, I didn't realize it at the time, but the reason I was in the principal's office, it has nothing to do with intelligence, actually. It has to do with, the way we teach kids now is we have to sort of stifle their natural curiosity, because
to comply with the rules.
You can't have a bunch of crazy kids running around, but by the same token, that level of thought and the way kids can just create, and that they live in this kind of dream world, we can't lose touch of that, because that's the thing that we can't, at least today, we can't train technology to do that. Like that's the piece of humanity. Like we're very fearful of technology, and it's a real threat that robotics and automation are going to take over jobs, absolutely displace people. AI, especially opaque AI, is a danger to us, because we are playing with matches and we don't understand what we're doing yet. And we don't know how to not code unconscious bias into these algorithms. But the other piece of it is, as humans, and it goes back to your COVID question, we have to think more broadly. So I think of it, so it's on one side, it's all diagrams, concentric circles, and then a Venn diagram. So the Venn diagram is if we really all make an effort to kind of project ourselves in the future and paint the picture of what we individually, like what do we care about? When I do this exercise with C-suite executives, they kind of don't want to do it to begin with. They're just like, well, this is stupid, and 25 years, I'm going to be dead. And it's like, no, you're putting blockers in front of something that you are going to invent. So why don't you invent yourself as not dead in the future? Let's start there. And then once they finally get through and they do the exercise and we share, what we find is that humanity, we all want the same things. Like there is this piece of all of us that we care about. It's about love, it's about family.
Belonging.
Yeah, it's all those things, and it's kind of wrapped around emotion. It's creativity, and the things that really make us inherently human. And then there's some, outliers, and then there's some like, you might have want to kept that one to yourself. But the point is that when other people see even the stuff that you think is crazy, they're like, wow, actually that's kind of cool. And wait, what if we took, an element of this and brought it together? And we start, naturally looking at the commonalities instead of what we're doing today, which is using technology to be divisive and make us angry at one another.
And scary,
And it's really, and it's amazing that we've allowed it to happen. Like we've just said, okay, let's do that,
And it's probably been the case since the beginning of time, right? Like any technology, from the wheel to fire to anything. Like we've always done the same things with technology, being afraid, being limited by our vision, and then sometime in future we start to broaden our perspective. And that kind of brings me to the point why virtual reality didn't really take off the way people were expecting it to take off. And how do you think? What do you think was the reason for these false expectations? Like media and clickbait content is cannot be the only answer, right? Like what did the public do wrong in terms of expectations?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of things. I mean, I think the fundamental component is just the form factor is weird.
Yeah.
And, not everyone wants to not be able to see their environment, right?
Yeah.
And this is a classic example. It's what we talk about all day long here. If you're a programmer, right, and you build a product, like you love your product, you think it's amazing, but if you don't understand the nature of your end user, then you will fail. It doesn't matter how great the product is. So everyone thought, here, plonk, here, put this giant brick on your face and you can go anywhere in the world. And then you realize that people aren't asking for that. Like they don't want to do that. They barely even want to be in the world they're in, let alone open up another one. So, it was sort of a marketing problem. It's also the technology, when it first came out, I mean, you could kind of argue it really goes back to the 60s.
Yeah.
But then, in the 90s,
the 90s were
kind of a moment.
Yeah.
And then, then Second Life came out. So you had kind of like the hardware moment in the 90s. And then you had Second Life, which was sort of virtual worlds. And like you can start to see where, okay, now I see like how I might use this.
How it's viable and how it's,
Still too early. And then when Oculus came out, and really it required, as much as I have my feelings about Facebook and the Metaverse, which we are going to talk about. But it kind of needed that level of investment and that level of access to a really large, I mean, they have one of the biggest user bases in the world, so they're able to kind of promote what the promise is. And, now I think there are some good titles and I think, people get them. But even today, so I had breakfast with Chelsea Rustrum, who's an American living here in Georgia.
Right.
She's been here for a couple of years. She's a blockchain expert. She's fantastic. And she said, okay, I got my Quest 2 and I went in it like 3 or 4 times. And then I didn't really know what to do. And I said, that's kind of the problem. And so I said, well, look, let's get accounts. Like, why don't you find me in Altspace? Like, it's Virtual Girl NY. And let's meet in Altspace and we can hang out. And there are lots of events and we can listen to music or go to one of the dance parties, which is super fun, not only for you, but for anyone who is in the room with you while you're dancing with an Oculus on, because you look like a total idiot. But it's, it doesn't
it's fun.
Matter. But, as soon as you say, we can hang, we are half a world apart most of the time, and yet we can be in the same room and we can interact. And to me, we've missed that messaging, right? We talk about social VR, but that doesn't mean anything to people
nobody understands what social VR is.
Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, it's like, it's like during the elections, if you talk to people in weird words and long words and stuff, like nobody understands what your promise is. But if you say that I'm going to build a huge goddamn wall, then everybody understands it. You know what I mean? And then, then whatever happens, happens. So, but let's jump around a little bit, right? So, music business. I want to hear all about it.
Yeah. So I moved to London, and I also kind of didn't really know anybody. Didn't really have a plan. I wanted to go to school there. I wanted to go to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. And my Shakespeare was so bad that after I did my audition, there's sort of 5 very, I mean, Shakespeare is like a god, right, in the UK. And they all sat there and there was sort of a silence and I was sort of standing on stage and I'm like, I was sort of like,
American girl doing
wasn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And then there was sort of silence. And then they all sort of looked at each other and like, I think they were just speechless. I thought, oh my God, I was so good that they were literally speechless. And one of them finally said, well, that was quaint. And I thought, oh dear. Anyway, they said, maybe you should learn a little bit more and then come back to us next year.
Right.
So I did a summer program. I ended up going to a different university, but in that time I started meeting people and I was always in love with music, had no musical talent. But I got really lucky and I got to join a company called Rough Trade. Mm-hmm. Which had, the Smiths, who then broke out and became Morrissey, and he had just left the label when I joined, so it was a little bit after that. But we had, Mazzy Star and James and the Sundays and like really incredible KLM, like all these incredible bands. And I was in charge of international licensing. Boy, I tell you, I stumbled upwards because despite my Shakespeare fail, in the same way when British people go to America, they just think that they're incredibly smart.
Yeah.
Somehow, because I was very energetic and from New York, and I was very confident, obviously, to do, and not necessarily very good at everything, but super confident. I just kept getting these pretty big jobs. But, I would study and I would ask the people around me, I'm like, how do you do a licensing contract, actually? They're like, isn't that what you got hired to do? I'm like, yeah, but I don't really know how to do one. So I talked to the lawyer, and then I got some of my own ideas, and, then it was fine. But
that's hustling. I mean,
well, and it is to me. It's even though I chose more of a like let's work for other people path. There's still an entrepreneurial spirit. So I kind of brought that into, how do I like look at what you're doing and make it better and find cooler ways of doing it. And and that was a really fun time. And the other good thing is that everyone wanted to be signed with Rough Trade. Mm-hmm. So I used to get backstage passes to everything.
Yeah, that's the fun of it. Yeah.
which was pretty great. We saw some pretty great bands. So it was fun.
All right. So how did the transformation to technology happen? And just to roll back again, what was the first tech you touched in your life?
Really, it was
that inspired you.
Well, I wouldn't say it was tech. I think it was the beginning of the app evolution, where I had started. I'd had 2 kids, so because I'd moved to LA right after London, and I got into production. Exactly the same thing. Like I just started telling people I wanted to get into television commercial production, and finally this woman said, "Oh, we're doing a Gloria Estefan her comeback video after her big accident, and I'm doing that tomorrow, and I need a production assistant, and so why don't you start?" And so I did that, and I. Then over, about a 6-year period became one of the top, commercial producers in Los Angeles.
Wow.
But also during that time got married and had 2 kids, so I couldn't work the way I was working.
Right.
But I couldn't not
work. Yeah.
So first I became a photographer. So I started photographing like the kids of celebrities.
Right.
Because they were in our preschool.
Good thinking. Yeah.
Well, they were there. So and kind of did that for a while until the kids got a little bit older, and then it was I thought, well, this is like a time where I can reinvent myself. So it was sort of right when Facebook and business, and that's been the interesting thing. Like I never was interested in, except for the music business, but like how to entertain like consumers.
Right.
Even on the side I was on in the music business, it's international licensing. Like how do you make money from this? How do you do something better?
Yeah. So you wanted to be the part of the business process.
The business, like I wanted to improve business process. Right. And, I had seen all these kind of marketing strategies and how people were leveraging, this is like, most companies didn't even have websites. So I kind of taught myself how to build websites. And by the way, I would just use templates. Like it was, again, no magic.
Yeah.
And then how to build Facebook profiles, and then how to sort of use engaging content. And through that, I I saw a company called Living Social.
Okay.
And they were looking for people to open up markets to be able to do this. It was like social commerce. So it was like some of the best restaurants and spas and things to do in your community. And here's an incentive, a voucher at a discount that you can buy to go do the coolest things in your realm. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. So I started doing research. And I saw another company called Groupon, which had really gotten big, and they were in New York City. And the first thing that happened was they were starting to piss off the merchants because they would sell 10,000 of these vouchers, and then the restaurant would just be busy with discount people who actually weren't coming back.
Yeah.
And the second thing is they were sort of doubling down and really kind of doing a push to just capture that market. So when I saw the Living Social was looking for people to be part of this in New York City, I wrote them. I actually on Facebook I messaged the founder, and I said, "Your strategy is all wrong," because clearly I know I have the answer. And if you think that's what you
the
should,
confidence again.
I said you should see my Shakespeare. But anyway, so I wrote this whole. I said this thing is all wrong. I said, you're going after a market that's already saturated with a company that has actually
angered the customers.
Yeah, done a disservice to the customers. So now you want to go in and compete. It's just like it's negative on all fronts.
Yeah.
Where I live now is in Fairfield County, Connecticut, and then which is right next to Westchester County, which is also in New Jersey. There's Bergen County. These are three of the wealthiest counties in the United States. And what do they have in common? They have exactly your demographic, which is primarily women who are at home. They're no longer working because they moved to the suburbs because they have a couple of kids, so they're not that busy, and they have disposable income. And Groupon's not there.
Right.
And so I literally got a call from a recruiter the next day. She said, "So we'll send me your CV." And then she called me back. She goes, "I have no idea what to make of this. Like, you have no sales experience. You have she goes,
production."
I don't know. She's like,
music?
Production, music business, international licensing, photographer. She's like, "We're gonna have to have a conversation about this one day, but today's not the time. They want to talk to you." So they flew me down to Washington, and it was funny. There was another woman there who I met. Who had done something kind of similar. She'd already had a phone interview, and she said, "You should this is where the money is. You should." And she lived in the same town I did, so we met in this whole interview process. And so she and I partnered, and we opened up all of Fairfield County, Connecticut, for Living Social.
Wow!
Which was really fun, and that actually was sort of my first. And again, the technology wasn't the thing, but after, and they sort of, they did the same thing. I felt like they were doing a disservice to some of the customers, and so I wanted to find another company that was higher levels. There was a company in San Francisco called BloomSpot, who did the same thing. They were in far fewer, only in 12 markets. Manhattan was one of them, but they focused only on the creme de la creme, so experiences that were $200 to $300, and up, and so. And what I didn't know is that what they were building on the back end was an AI to, again, look at that consumer data. What is the behavior? Because they had the creme de la creme, the marketer's dream of demographics. And
that was the time where concerns of privacy were not that high.
No one really got
Everybody
it.
was mining data.
And no one knew that they
were
and us as consumers, we didn't know that how much value it had, right? So we just sort of check the box.
We were consumers then, not product, right?
Yeah, these little tiny terms and conditions, and no one read it. They're like, "Oh, yes, I want that. I want that." Yeah. And so that was the first time I put together that, wait a minute, there's so many layers to this interwebs.
Interwebs.
I was like, this is actually very interesting. And really, to me, that is what the metaverse is. That was the very beginning. The internet is the very first portal into, because it is. It's just this interconnectivity of data and experience
it's
and
an alternative plane of life.
Exactly.
Like it's totally separate. It could be totally separate, but at the same time, it's self-containing.
Exactly.
Everything. Yeah. So it's a life. Could you tell me a little bit about your parents? Like what the background of your parents is and what kind of people raise you?
They were crazy people. Like, I think I would have had maybe a better shot at survival being raised by wolves. Because, and I say this to them, and I say this to them with love, they were completely nuts. But what they did for me was, you know, when you get thrown into the deep end of the pool, you have to swim.
Gotta survive, yeah.
So, and I was the oldest by 6 years. So my younger sister is very young. And, you know, at that age, that's a big, like,
it's a big gap.
They're just, you know, like, you have nothing in common, you know. So she was, and actually, I thought she was adorable until she was old enough to start telling on me. And then she was much less adorable, like, really much less adorable. But so you know, it was kind of up to me to sort of forge this path. And I think that, you know, my early confidence was actually not confidence at all. It was just abject fear that
way to protect
I have
yourself,
no idea what I'm doing, like, at all. And I don't know how to navigate the world. Like, you know, there wasn't really anyone saying, you know, it's like if I showed up in time for dinner, no one was like, what were you out doing? Like, I could have been doing anything.
Right.
And like, I still in my teens, I kind of was. And so I think what it did teach me is all right, like, I don't want to go through my life being fearful. So I want to learn. And so the more that I learn, then the less fearful I am. And the less fearful I am, the more the confidence is real. And, you know, when you have a vision for something, it's a lesson I learned really early. And I think it's why when I saw VR for the first time, my mind exploded. I feel like if we can see something, like if we can see a path to something, it takes away some of the fear. Like, if we could show the people who were saying the wheel, that's never going to work.
Right.
But we could somehow show them
how it's going to work.
years, like, this is the opportunity. Like, this is how this is going to change. This is going to change modern transportation, right?
Right.
And you look at, like, that was another little piece of making the world smaller so that we could connect better, right? Again, and it goes to that Venn diagram, right? And so is VR. Right, VR is one of the ways we can make the world tiny because we can all be together. It doesn't matter where we are physically. And then the beauty is that we can bring culture and art and all the things that make us...
And make it broader, make it more accessible to more people. I agree 100%. So what I heard is there were no strict rules for little Amy. There was total freedom, right? And you were on your own. And you learn a lot. And in the process of learning, probably failed a lot. So can I hear your opinion on failure and what Amy Peck does to manage the failure?
Yeah, I think I was really bad at like life. Like when I was young, like I would get jobs and I kind of had no plan, right? So it was just, I would get these jobs. I would want to be out partying and playing and having fun because, again, I sort of grew up with no supervision, you know, and around a lot of powerful people. So in Palm Beach, where I grew up, there's a lot of wealth, like incredibly wealthy people. And so I had access to sort of pockets of society that a lot of people don't have access to. So I got to see things that were very glamorous. And so I was drawn to that because I was young and I kind of didn't know any better, that just is very superficial.
It is, yeah.
So, you know, I was fired from probably my first 5 or 6 jobs. And, you know, the reason for going to London, you know, it was interesting because I had started modeling when I was really young. So when I was about 12 years old, my mom took me to New York, you know, into the city. And we were, because we were in New York a lot. And, you know, a friend had said, you know, you should really take her, like, she's really tall, I was really tall, really skinny. She said, you know, you should take her to a modeling agency. So she took me to meet Eileen Ford, who had one of the biggest agencies in the world. And they said, yeah, great, I come up in the summer. So that was even worse, right? So now I'm in New York City I'm staying at the model's apartment. So there's like 8 of these girls. And let me tell you, one of them is like naughtier than the next, right? Because they hang out with rock stars. They can get whatever they want gets given to them, which is a very bad lesson to give
for anyone.
At that point, I think I was now 13, because it was like the next summer I went up there. A 13-year-old, right?
It's not a good example, right?
It's terrible. And then I'm already in this weird little enclave. And like my family wasn't particularly wealthy, but they were, like if you put them anywhere else in the world, we'd be really wealthy. But in the context of where we were just sort of normal, nice middle class family, right? Like I went to private school and, had very nice things. But, I feel like I took a really bad left turn and I looked at the really superficial things, that were available to me in the world for really no good reason, like nothing I had earned, none of it. And yet I had this gilded existence. And I had sort of a crisis of conscience. I went and lived in Japan for a year. And I was making
soul searching?
I was on a contract to model, and I was making a ton of money, way too much money for what I was doing. And by now I think I just turned 18.
Right.
And I was taking a year off before going to university. And it was an interesting experience because I loved making the money, but I really found it was kind of like, it was sort of this grind. And then I kept meeting these people.
Repetitive and
And I'm just like, I don't care about anything you're saying. And then I'm thinking, but I'm not saying anything either. So I started, while I was there, to seek out, I started to befriend the photographers.
Right.
Who were also creators. And I started to kind of, look at the expat community there, and sort of be guided by people who were there because they wanted to learn another culture, not because they wanted to just make a lot of money. And I think that was kind of my turning point where I was like, okay, the money is great, and I decided. But
I need a purpose. I need something.
Right, exactly. And I was like, actually, now I have enough money to pay for college, because my dad said you can go to this college or you can go to this college and you have to get your MBA. Otherwise, if you want to study something else, you pay. And I was like, I don't want to get an MBA because I love business. And in hindsight, maybe it would have been a good thing, but it wasn't what I wanted to do.
What did you want?
I really wanted to go to an arts college because I'd always been a creative person, but because I saw that I kept getting rewarded for that linear thought, and I was good in math and was good in science, and so do those things, and there weren't that many women, that were good at those things, and so there was a lot of encouragement, you should do this, and so I never really got to kind of explore what the creative side would be, and I was on my way I had a job in Milan, and I had a stop in London on the way there and back, and so on the way, and the photographer and the models were the most hideous people ever. They were so disgusting, and they were all one got mad because she slept with the photographer the first night, and then the other one, and I just thought, oh my God, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
I am not gonna live, this is a small life. Doing this, this isn't worth it for the money. I don't care. I'm not doing this. So, and I had a job when I got back to New York, and I was I canceled the job, and I said, I'm going to spend just one day in London. I need to decompress. And it was really it was such a bad experience that I just needed to I wanted to not talk to anybody, and I just wanted to walk around. So I booked a night at this, just pushed my flight from London out the next day, because Milan's was kind of a pit.
Right.
In the nicest possible way.
Nicest
who lives in Milan. And I booked it at a hotel called Claridge's, because then it was I didn't know. I thought I wanted this cool. I wanted the real authentic British experience.
One,
So I go in this hotel, and it's super grand. And it's very old school, and the clawfoot tub, and I just thought, this is so cool. And I walked around the city for the whole day. I probably walked 15 miles. And I was just walking around, and I just liked it, and I thought, this is actually what I need. I was in Japan, it was nice to kind of be away from my parents because they're so nuts, and I thought, you know what? I'm actually just going to go back to New York. I'm going to sublet my apartment, and I'm just going to move to London. And I told people this, and they said, are you with an agency there? I said, no. I said, no more contracts, no more agency, no more modeling. I'm going to go to school, and I'm just going to go. all right, fine. So I rented my apartment, packed up all my stuff, and I just showed up. And I called a couple people before I left, and I said, do you know anyone in England? And someone said, oh, there's this guy, his name is Toby Rolt, and go talk to him. So I went and I met him, and he's his family married into the Astor family, which is an incredibly proper family in the UK.
Proper family.
Yeah. And so he had this beautiful apartment, just sort of between kind of Kensington and Shepherd's Bush, but we always called it Kensington because Kensington fancy, Shepherd's Bush not fancy.
Right.
But anyway, so I went to meet him, and he said, well, actually, this is a 3-bedroom. He had a 3-bedroom, 2-level flat with like this huge garden, like a spectacular place. And he said, I'm going to rent the 2 rooms, and there's this lovely girl named Camilla who's going to move into the other, and she's coming around tonight. Why don't you stay for dinner, meet her, and if we all get on, why don't you, and it literally was like that. And then the next day, I was talking to another one of their friends about, getting a job, and so they put me in touch with this company that actually physically pressed records.
Wow.
That's how it's called, Making Records, MAYKING. And they said, go meet this guy. And I went to meet this guy, and he started laughing so hard because I was like, so here's my plan. I have no plan. I just arrived here a week ago, blah, blah. And he's like, well, do you have, a work permit?
Yeah.
And I said, no. And he said, I said, oh, I have a place to live. And he said, do you know your way around? And, do you know the music business at all? And it was like, pretty much no to everything. And he just was like laughing. He's like, I am going to regret this, but I'm so curious how you're going to do this that I'm willing to risk, this like pittance of a salary that I'm going to pay you. And so he hired me into that. And so because of that, I met all of the record labels. And then I got a job at Polygram, and that's how I ended up at Rough Trade.
Wow. But it's interesting that this whole timeline came from the question about failure.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that when you realize that something is not going right, you're kind of making a hard turn, like 180.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I obviously don't like talking about failure.
But
I've had, and I would say that since that kind of pivot, the failures have been more kind of incremental, where it's been more sort of overcoming uncertainty. Right. So if I got frustrated with a job and I left, I would leave before it hits the and it's not to say I didn't get fired more. I was let go from other jobs, but it was like Making Records and kind of was sort of stayed, right? And I wasn't going anywhere, and I wasn't going to move up the ladder,
right?
And so it's like I had to leave, but I would just like quit, and be sort of emotional about it, and be like, okay, well, I'm not going to take it anymore, and then leave, and again have no plan, and I kept doing this sort of no plan, and eventually
eyeballing it all the way, right?
But it's like you kind of have to, at some point, you've got to have a plan, like something. You could find to change the plan, but you need a plan.
You can't freestyle all the time.
Yeah,
right?
it's like, I was like, all right, you're getting a little too old for this. And then I would say, the biggest failure was, and it was my marriage. I ended up getting married in Los Angeles, having 2 beautiful boys back to back. And it was so hard having them young. And then, I wanted to be on the East Coast, and he wanted to be on the West Coast. Right. And we just couldn't make it work. And so, that was more of like a personal failure. When I look back at it now, it never would have worked. Like I was the wrong person for him. Because he's with the right person now, and now we're like modern family. Like we're all buddies, and we all work together as sort of parents and co-parents. But that was a really hard period in my life, because then I had these 2 very small children. I was like taking them all over the world, and it wasn't the right kind of lifestyle for them, needing a stable life. And so I think having kids and then within 5 years being then a single mom was really, really incredibly hard.
It's tough, yeah.
But boy, I tell you, that really makes you put a plan on paper.
Yeah.
You know, because now it's not just me. Like I'm okay. Kind of, you can sort of dangle me off the ledge, and I'm like.
But they depend on me. Yeah. So.
And I can't just be like out there, just like la la la.
Yeah.
You know? So I think that was the moment where, you know, to me, it's like it forces you to think about the future.
Grounds you.
And it forces you to look at the things about yourself you don't like, you know, and things that you missed. And you know, and I was still like, there was a piece of me that was a little bit like I had to live in the nice neighborhood, and you know, I had to drive the nice car. You know, and it's just like, it just kind of doesn't matter. Like it really doesn't matter. And look at the things that made me happy, which were, you know, the traveling and constantly learning. And so how do I now bring that into the next level of my career?
Right.
Yeah.
Let's flip the script and tell me about success. Like what happens when you feel that you've been successful in something? How do you celebrate? What do you do? How often do you celebrate? How big of a success it should be? You know what I mean?
You know, it's kind of funny that I don't think I measure, again, even that incremental success.
Right.
I think that I just want to keep, like, success for me is living the way I do now, because I kind of get to do whatever I want. I have responsibilities. You know, I've got college payments, and somebody, for the love of God, will you finish school? One of you two, please. I love you, but please finish school. I've got one that's about to go to law school.
Right.
No, keep learning. But, yeah, I think I for me, success is that I've maintained a connection to my curiosity, and I love the way I get to live. I love being here. I hope that I'm adding value to the startups that we work with, and when we work with governments or we work with companies, like starting to think about this global village, and I'm very passionate about that. So, you know, what my hope is that, you know, the success will be measured not necessarily in my lifetime. Like I don't need to stand on, you know, a pulpit and get a medal or go raw. Like I'm happy, like that's the reward. The success will be measured by, did I touch enough people and inspire them to just try and figure this out, you know.
But do you do these regular measurements of gauging whether or not you're on the right track, whether or not you're going in the right direction? Like, do you do that, or you just get a feeling of everything is how it's supposed to be?
You know, I think I've started meditating in the last 3 or 4 years, which for someone like me who's just like very all over the place, like shiny squirrel, you know, it's terrible. I started about 3 years ago, and I'm not consistent, but it's really grounded me in this whole notion of presence. And so I started looking at the science of mindfulness and meditation, and they're different things. You know, they help each other, but they're different. And the science of mindfulness, and it really has helped me focus this construct that I believe is a path forward. And I'm not saying I am right. What I'm saying is we all need to build a vision for what we want our lives to be like. And I think if we do that, not only will we be surprised at really how much we want more of the same things than not, but that there's an electrical energy that we emit when we are all kind of aligned. And you know, it's, people call it being in the zone, and then
flow state, this and that.
Exactly. But if we're all in flow state, it's like, I think that there are some things that we can put in place that will make the correct path seem effortless, and then thereby giving us a clue that in fact we are on the right path. So again, it's not about being right, it's about collectively working towards something that we all agree is getting us to what we want. It's for the better,
yeah. After the leap motion, what happens then? So you start your own business, and what does it do?
Well, I literally I just had this idea. And so I went to, I think it was OC3. It was the Oculus Connect conference, OC3. And
2016, 2020?
This would have been 2015.
15, yeah.
Oh, no, you're right, 26, I think. Yeah, it would have been 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd left Leap Motion in early 2015, and I actually started working more with some of the startups who were starting to do some, like enterprise VR, mostly in healthcare and behavioral health. And so I thought, I shouldn't really be working with startups. I should be working with enterprise. First of all, startups can't, really afford to pay. It's too early. And instead, I want to just help the startups, not be taking money from them. And I want the money to come from enterprise who are going to benefit from the startup. So I switched my business model. I literally sat down on the dining room table of my boyfriend at the time and went online, and I just found a domain name, and I did a website, like literally on GoDaddy, and it's still up, and it's the work. If you want to see an example of how not to do a website, it's still up, Endeavor.com. We have a new one that we're working on. But anyway. So I put this webpage up, and then so I go to OC3. By day 3, it's a long conference, and it's intense. Like, they give you a lot of information. It's very high energy. You're meeting everybody, thousands of people there. And at day 3, it was lunchtime. I was getting kind of tired. Had just my voice was really raw. Like, I could barely talk. And I find a table, and I see like tables of people, and I'm like, oh, they're going to talk to me. Ooh, they're for sure going to talk to me. I'm like, oh, there's like only one guy there. I don't recognize him. So I sit at that table. And he looks up and he starts talking. I'm like, oh, damn it. Anyway, it turns out he's from a big forklift manufacturer called Raymond. And they have this problem. And of course, I can't help myself. I'm like, ooh, tell me what you're trying to do. And he said, well, we want to train, we want to use VR, but we partnered with this company. And they partnered with a company that I know is not a very good company.
Right.
To do the training. They were charging him a ton of money. And I said, well, this is your lucky day. I said, I was really trying not to talk to anyone today. But I said, this is what I do. Here's my card. Here's some of my work, and so forth. So that was actually probably my first big, I had been doing like little things with like Kaiser Permanente, which is a healthcare group, but really small, and weren't building anything. Like, there wasn't a product. It was just kind of, I was doing a lot of research. It wasn't as... And
you were consulting how to use technology for their benefit?
Yeah, how would you use this? So it was very theoretical.
Right.
This was like, we want to build this thing. We want to train, technicians, like forklift drivers on the device. And so, it was my first big, like, we're going to build a project. Yeah. So I pulled them away from that developer who was actually... They were going to do a disservice. They were just going to milk them for a ton of money, and they weren't going to deliver a product that was going to add value to them. So I found a developer for them, and we built their training, and it was launched at HTC Vive at CES a year later. And that was like a really pivotal moment, and it was. I learned a lot from that negotiation, because boy, did I ever undercharge those guys, but. But it was, I just wanted to do the job so badly. And, there was part of me that, again, I didn't know the end to end. I'd never run a development team before, but I knew what they were doing wasn't going to work. Like, I looked at the business model, because I have the business side, so much experience. I was able to model out what they were planning to do. And I was like, you're never going to make money doing this. So, so I said, I'll figure out the rest. And so I worked with really, really good people, one of whom ended up, joining me at Endeavor as a partner later. Mm-hmm. And from there, we just, like, the biggest companies in the world.
Wow. Could you tell me one or two projects that is kind of sticks out for you?
Yeah. So one of my favorites, I can't tell you the name of the client, but one of my favorites is one of the biggest e-commerce sites in the world, so maybe you can figure it out. But we did most of the work with them on the back end, right? So how to improve, distribution process, safety of workers in the warehouse, logistics, visualization, all that kind of thing. One of my favorite projects, very, very hard at the time, was they wanted to use eye tracking actually on an AR device, because we had to be able to measure while they were working at their station, using eye tracking to actually detect when people were fatigued, because they were on a fixed schedule of breaks. So it's like, you go at 1, you go at 1:15, and they would take their 15 or 20 minutes or whatever that was.
And that's much needed for that company.
Oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is. And so it was so hard because, there's really only HoloLens at the time.
Yeah.
And it was HoloLens 1. There were some other glasses, but the eye tracking wasn't as good. So we talked to a company that is one of the biggest eye tracking, which was acquired later. We talked to them and said, like, how do we do this? And then we went and we did do some stuff with HoloLens, but we went with another set of AR glasses, and we kind of built these purpose-built eye trackers in an AR, because they had to have what's called ANSI certification.
Right.
To be worn as safety glasses. So that was our challenge. So you could do that with HoloLens, because they flip up and you wear the safety glasses under it, but then it's really hard to place the eyeglasses.
Yeah.
So anyway, the eye tracking. So once we solved the technical piece, and then we couldn't store, because it's medical data. Right, so
you can't.
So we're measuring their pupils. So not only are we able to tell if they're tired, there's other underlying conditions that you can detect through pupils. So we couldn't have it stored on servers that even were accessible internally, even though they were private on-prem servers. So we had to do a completely separate. We had to go outside their network, use a separate Wi-Fi system that was specifically for this purpose, and wire the data directly to the mobile phones of the end user. That was the only way we could. And it was, let me tell you, it was such a hack job, because all of these disparate systems.
And not to store anything without redundancies. that's
it's so hard. So we were able to get a POC off the ground, and I'm going to misstate the numbers because I don't remember them exactly.
Right.
But it was in the order of about 23 to 27% improvement in productivity when you force a break based on biorhythms and actually being tired than when you just do it schedule. And that's a huge number. Now, we had a fairly low data set, so statistically,
iffy,
if we scale, and we weren't able to scale it technically at the time. Like, we could do it today, but we couldn't do it then. But that was such a
it's an amazing product.
Puzzle piece. And when I think about the type of thinking that creative thought, real creators and the kids who are in the principal's office all the time, that's how they think, right?
Outside of it.
Yeah. And it's not just outside the box. I actually call it volumetric thinking.
Yeah.
So it's still in the sphere, right? So because we still have to ground ourselves in reality, but not being afraid to go, all right, well, this doesn't work, but what if we took that and then there's a thing over there I saw, and starting to connect these disparate thoughts. And that's what creators do. And so,
what if we take these two boxes and combine them?
Yeah. And so, and that's, again, all of these little things are little, data points on, in how I have chosen to evolve what I believe is a helpful path for us to get to this next generation of just life for all of us that we want and we care about.
Yeah. Speaking of AR, what do you think about the case of Magic Leap?
Well,
why did all of this go down like it went down?
The way it went down.
Yeah.
Well, I think that they too had the vision for this kind of beautiful world for consumers, but that you could still see your surroundings.
Yeah.
And so,
the promise was awesome.
Yeah. But, the reality of a $2,800 consumer device was kind of impossible at the time. Yeah. And so they have a whole new team in now. And the reality is, HoloLens 2 needs a competitor.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so Magic Leap now is totally pivoted. They have a CEO from Microsoft. They have a lot of Microsoft people. They have people from Unity. They have people from traditional consulting as well. So
they're becoming more realistic now, you say?
Yeah, and they're focused 100%
Yeah, because I was waiting for that prototype for years.
I know.
The promise was amazing. The designs were amazing. The materials were amazing. I'm like, this is going to be epic.
Completely. So I've seen, they have a game called Dr. Grunberger's something or other, and it's sort of a space, asteroids game.
Yeah.
But you put on a Magic Leap and it, scans your room, and man, its edge detection and its plane detection is incredible because, you're playing this game in your, environment, and like if there's a portal on the wall, like it looks really real.
On the wall.
Oh yeah, and they're like coming out.
No slippage, no nothing, right?
Oh yeah, but the nice thing is, unlike VR, where every once in a while I knock over a lamp or I, hit my hand on the sofa.
You have full awareness of your
I know what's
environment,
happening, and not only, but the experience, is actually interacting. I mean, that is the promise of mixed reality, and also HoloLens is succeeding in a vacuum, and so from an industry perspective, without
it's never good.
Yeah, without Magic Leap coming in and saying, hey,
this is my vision.
We're good in this stuff, and HoloLens is good with this stuff. But if you like the Microsoft ecosystem, it's great. Like you should definitely do HoloLens too. But if you want an open ecosystem and you want to be able to use different types of tools and different communication tools, then this is a great option. Because I am very bullish on mixed reality. I mean, it's really, to me, that is where we're just seamlessly moving between, digital and physical experiences, and we're not going to be talking about like is it digital, is it real, right? Yeah. It's just going to be, and it's going to be our perception, and we're going to get to see.
And for the Gen Z, these two worlds are
they're blended anyway.
Yeah, they're blended anyway. Like my daughter, she lives in two different worlds.
Yeah.
And all of them are. Okay, so Amy, what is the word startup for you? Like, what does it mean?
It's bravery. Okay. Number one, a little bit of crazy. It's creativity, and to use the very cliche now funny line from Silicon Valley. It's a lot of people who are trying to make the world a better place. And the ones who really are trying to make the world a better place, instead of just coming up with a good idea that makes money, they do have a better shot. Because at the end of the day, startups are not about making money. They can and they will if you have the right kind of team. There's a lot of elements that go into it.
And if you're making the world a better place, right?
Yeah, and if you're making the world a better place, but if you really are changing something or doing something better, or something that's pushing humanity forward, or a process forward, or helping us communicate better, Uber's a great example of that. It's like, wow, it's always like, a couple of people, on a street, they're having a problem, and they go, wow, wouldn't this really be? And the difference between a true entrepreneur and a startup founder, ideas are a dime a dozen. It's execution. And you have to, not only believe in your idea, but it is so hard to build a company from the ground up that if it's not something you care about, if you're just doing it to make money, I think 98% of the time you will fail. Because it just doesn't,
because it's going to die on you 4 times.
Well, it's going to get really hard. And then you're not going to have the money yet. And it's just, then you don't have the vision to carry you through. And the vision is what carries you through.
Yeah. So is the way I hear is not all new businesses are startups, right? So what is the difference in your opinion?
Well, I think, I think we get stuck in sort of the semantics of what is or what isn't. I'm not even sure I have.
Does it matter?
I think it doesn't matter. I think it's, are you solving a problem?
Right.
Are you adding value to either existing companies? What kind of startup are you? Are you, a disruptor, or are you, sort of a pure play innovator? Is it something that we just haven't seen before? And I think you're going to see more of those because there's so much more technology. There are going to be things that we just haven't thought of yet, that how we can use this. But I'm also really bullish in no matter what you're building, look at how technology can help you scale it or improve your product and services, improve your product and service, or even the process for which you iterate, because in the very near future, not only is technology going to be more accessible, but the next generation workforce is going to demand all the bells and whistles and all the new tools. And if you haven't thought about it now and you don't have a path to get there, it's going to be really hard to attract talent even. This
is the futurist's world. Like, I mean, you got to be a futurist in whatever you do, whatever business you are. So what brought you to Georgia?
Well, the first time was, I have to thank Colin Donahue.
Okay. Hey, Colin.
Yes, Colin. Because he is the founder and I guess co-founder of Startup Grind, the Startup Grind chapter here.
Right.
And they had I think it might have been the first, but maybe it was the second or third. But they had the big Startup Grind conference. This is about at least 4 years ago now.
Right.
And
Silicon Valley.
They invited me to come and speak. No, it was here, in the first time in Tbilisi. And here's what's funny. The whole connection came about because I actually gave a talk for another company called US Mac, who works very closely with Jita, and who actually are the producers of these matching grant. We do all the workshops, and then we bring the VCs over. I had done a talk for them at an event in Silicon Valley and met one of the VCs called Bill Reichert, who sat in the front row of my talk. And I talk about not utopian vision, a protopian vision.
Okay.
In other words, we've got problems. Like, I'm not Pollyanna. Like, I see there's problems, but let's try and build a better future. And he said, the future is doomed. It's dystopian. And so he argued with me, and I pointed out that, first of all, he was only in the front row, even at 6'6" or however, he's huge, very tall man.
Yeah, he is.
I said, I'm on stage and I have the microphone, so I am right. But anyway, we had about a really funny 20-minute discourse. So that's how Colin got my name. He said, Bill talked to Colin and said, you should bring Amy Peck over because she has, this really, protopian view. I mean, I don't agree with her, but you should bring her over. So I get here and, Colin's like, okay, well, I paid for you to come over and all you're going to do is talk about VR and we need to get some more work out of you while you're here. So can you go help us we've got a room full of startups here on the side. And actually I was happy to do it. That to me is not work. I mean, I love it. I walk in and there's the whole US Mac team who I've been, so I have to travel halfway around the world.
To see all of you.
Yeah, and then the second question was, why didn't you invite me to this? But in any case, and they didn't think I would come. They were like, well, we didn't think you could take a week off and do this. So that was really the start of it all. And then once I saw, that first group of startups were so passionate, and they were, and they needed help. And it wasn't because they were bad or they were bad ideas. The more I talked to them, they had no structure. There hasn't. You have really good business programs in the universities here, and now we've talked to a lot of them, and they're all really eager to bring in more kind of entrepreneurship programs and even high tech programs. But it takes a long time to introduce that type of curriculum, and you don't want to do it quickly, right? You want to bring in smart technology. So over these last several years, we're starting to help. I think it's critical. I think these programs are great because they're very concentrated and we can get a lot done in a short period of time.
And give the empirical knowledge to.
Exactly. But then what we really need is to help build the ecosystem and help build a pathway through the university systems to really, and even in the high school systems, to teach entrepreneurship and change mindset a little bit. I do find that having, this country has been through incredible turmoil and then kind of come through the other side, and yet been able to cling to their culture and language and the things that they hold dear. But there's a lot of shrapnel that comes along with living here, right?
Yeah.
And this optimism isn't the natural go-to.
No.
Right? And so it's really important that we start teaching kids as young as we can. And we don't even have to use technology, just to infuse them with probably not my level of crazy confidence, but just a level of confidence.
Just optimism.
Yeah.
Because optimism was never our strong suit, you know what I mean? Throughout the history, we didn't have a lot of reasons for optimism.
Right.
We're realists and, defending ourselves, and that's kind of how we roll.
Yeah.
And we need optimism right now, because you need optimism to make a leap forward.
Yeah.
And we need a leap forward. We just can't walk forward. We got to jump because we're too way behind.
I agree.
So what do you think, this brings me to the very important question for me. What, in your opinion, needs to happen in Georgia to help her make that leap?
Yeah, so it's funny. I was joking with a few of us, because this is one of the core things. Like, we ask ourselves this, like, how can we make this happen, and how can we be helpful, and how can we be catalysts?
Right.
And I sort of jokingly said, I've said to several people here, I said, just give us a building. Give us a hub. Like, Tech Park is great, and it is a beginning. But I need something, big, where we have a whole, we have halls, and we have education, and we have
campus.
All of the different specialties, not just entrepreneurship,
not
but
just business, not just technology.
Bring in tech. Then have lodging, whether it's in partnership with a local hotel, so that we can bring. There are great minds around the world, right? Who we can bring here, and then we bring together all the great minds of Georgia. So that's one. Two is we have to find ways to entice big enterprise companies to come here. Even though now there's a big opportunity for remote work and remote workers, and that I don't see changing in the foreseeable future.
No. Yeah.
That there still can be global opportunities for people who come through these programs to be able to stay here in Georgia. But my concern is, if we only do the education component, that we're just going to be training a workforce that's then going to leave, and we're going to experience the brain drain that so many countries have, and they'll just go live in the US or go live in Europe. And we don't want that to happen, so that if we can bring more enterprises here and give them the incentives to be here, so that there's a pathway directly from school to university, into these great jobs, then the government support continued. So we have that. We just need more. We need more, more people to participate.
Yeah.
And universities, like really these education programs that start all the way back, I think even into middle school. And part of it's mindset.
I can argue that kindergarten is a good place to start as well.
Just even tinkering, like little maker kits.
Yeah.
And we had a startup here who has some really great kits. Like, let's just, let's buy a bunch of them and put them in the schools.
Yep.
So that's it. The piece where we can't help you, where we need your help, is, what does Georgia want? What do Georgians want their future to look like? Because if we just come in, and it's the thing that I think America has done wrong with foreign policy. Hopefully this won't be seen by anyone in the CIA. Is that we've just assumed that you want to live the way we do, and we forget to ask people what they want.
Well, it's a tricky question, because, I mean, our character, Georgian character, is very bipolar, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like, you put 5 Georgians in a room and you ask them what they want, you get 7 opinions.
Right.
Like, you actually do that, and in every 5 minutes it could change. So, it's tough. It's tough to find out what we want, because we rarely agree on what we want. You know what I mean? Like, you can go to startup ecosystem, and majority of people will agree on what the country should look like. But then you move 7 meters to the left, and you see a whole bunch of people that disagree with that.
Yeah.
And it's very eclectic here. So I think it's very tricky here in Georgia, because there is no consolidation of opinion in the population. You know what I mean? Because the ecosystem, our ecosystem, is probably a 0.1% of the population.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's tough. Depends on who you asking. So, going back to the State Department activities in the 90s here, like they were probably asking some people, but those people did not represent the other population.
Yeah.
And there is no right answer to that. Like you cannot ask the right group of people because they are all equal and they are all, have different opinions.
And they all want something a little different. Well, and I think that maybe it is then just
we need to be
planting the
more
seeds.
informed.
Yeah.
We need to be more informed to know exactly what we want, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what's possible.
Yeah.
And going back to the optimism part, like, because we don't have enough optimism, if you ask us what we want, our aspirations may not sound...
They're lower,
yeah. Because there is no optimism, because we know that in 5 years, it might hit the fan and then nothing happens. Like we go back to the dark ages. Nobody knows.
Well, I really, really, really would like to find, and there's talk of it, right? There's different people have talked about different buildings that might work or different spaces.
Right.
And, that it may just be, let's plant the seed, right?
I agree with you.
Because we do all agree that, having some kind of center, because what that does is, first of all, it's a center of gravity, right? So anyone who really is interested in this kind of change and pushing things forward and entrepreneurship and technology, they'll know, okay, there's a place here. And it also sends a message to the rest of the world that, Georgia's planted a flag in the ground and they are going to put resources behind it. And the one thing I hear over and over again, and I'm an example of this, is that when people come to Georgia from outside of Georgia, they fall in love.
Yeah.
You can't not fall in love with this.
In case of Colin stayed, and then he brought you and a lot of people like you. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Yeah.
And now you can't get rid of us.
No, I mean we ain't trying. We ain't trying. Trust me. We're trying to lure more of you here.
So we say this to startups all the time: is don't bury the lead. It's like if you say, like, we're building this hub and you bring people here, we know what's going to happen. So let's do that, right? At least that's a start.
Let's actually do it. Yeah.
I mean, it's a start. And I think the more people who come here, and, I think there's value in being, it sounds a little weird, but I like to be, among the least intelligent and worldly people in any given room, because there's so much for all of us to learn from other people's experience. And, there's a whole brain trust out there, and there's a whole brain trust here in Georgia. Like, let's find a place for them to mix it up.
With unique perspectives, like everywhere. Yeah.
We're not all going to agree,
awesome.
But I think we'll do some pretty cool things.
Well, let's imagine that Doc Brown arrived here in DeLorean and dropped off 20 years, like Amy Peck from 20 years ago. What would you tell her or ask her?
Oh, from 20 years ago?
Yeah.
I would say keep doing exactly what you're doing.
Okay. Just keep
because
at
it gets really good later on.
Yeah. Wouldn't you spoil it though?
No, but I want them, I know that even that little seedling then I would have been like, oh, really?
Oh, really? I can't wait.
What did she mean? But it's funny you say 20 years, because the exercise that I do is projecting yourself the 20 years in the future. And the reason I choose that number, and it's funny, like people just want to argue about it. Like they don't want to do it. It's the weirdest. It's like, why do you not want to just like fantasize for 5 minutes? Like it's not going to kill you, I promise. But because like 20 years is far enough away that we can't quite, sometimes I do 25. It just depends on my mood that day. But like we don't have, like if you ask someone like, what are you going to be doing in 20, 25 years? They don't really have a good answer yet. They might say something like, oh, I hope for world peace. And it's like, they haven't thought about it.
So that's my next question. What if that same DeLorean arrives and, Amy from 20 years forward comes
in the future?
Yeah. What would you tell her or ask
Get
her?
out of your own way and start learning about technology. Get off of Facebook, get off of Nextdoor and whining about someone cutting in line at the coffee shop. Like, don't live a small life.
Yeah, I hope 20 years from now you see that and you're watching this interview, Amy, and listen to that.
I hope so, because, boy, and I hope Nextdoor doesn't hear this either. I feel bad that I used them, because they had the best idea. Like, it was a good idea, like community information, but it's just devolved into this, like, people whining about stuff all the time. Like, stop whining. This is like, life is beautiful.
Who would you like to listen in this format? Who would you like to listen to? Who would you like to see?
Oh, gosh, there's so many people I'd love to see.
Just one or two people.
Well, I think I'd love to see a woman by the name of Ellen Langer.
Okay.
She was actually the first tenured female psychology professor at Harvard.
Okay.
There have been many female professors, but she was the first tenured. She studies mindfulness and the science of mindfulness, and she actually has a video on YouTube I highly recommend. I'll send you the link. You can share
I'll link
it
in the description.
And it really shows how we're resting too much on our laurels. Like, we're not doing enough every day, and it's not that hard to learn a little bit every day.
Yeah.
Because you'd be amazed at how it kind of creeps up
just
on you.
Just a tiny bit.
Just a little bit, and engage in. And it doesn't have to be meditation. It can be taking a walk. It can just be, just sitting and like
slowing
being
down
with your child for a minute, like just sitting with them and hanging out and just listening. I think it's like, I love her whole rhetoric. Like, it's just
right.
It's actually not rhetoric. It's science, but she packages it in a way that's really accessible. And there are 100 other people like that in each of their specialties. There's another gentleman by the name of Walter Greenleaf who leads the Human-Computer Interaction Lab at Stanford. And he's just brilliant and a beautiful human. And, there's just too many. We could
hopefully one day
I
could do that with them too.
Yeah.
I mean, interview them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So before we move to the final stage of our interview, let's talk about Metaverse. Like, what is it for the people who don't really know?
Well, it's if you took your laptop and you opened it up and you climbed through it into the internet.
Right.
That's the metaverse, right? In conceptual terms, in my mind. And again, you talk about people not having the same opinion. This is one of those things where people don't have the same opinion, or they describe it a little differently. Today, the metaverse that is accessible is really social VR.
Right.
Right. These are these virtual worlds that you're now starting to see. It's similar to what Second Life. Second Life was kind of one of the first, metaverses, I don't know, who knows. And it was so well thought out. I mean, Philip Rosedale, I know him well. He's just brilliant. I think he might be from outer space. I'm not entirely sure. He's like crazy brilliant. Like Elon, right? He's for sure from outer space.
He's there for sure.
He saw the world. He understood the value of digital goods. He understood this notion of building kind of an aspirational version of yourselves. He also understood cryptocurrency, and eventually when he opened up a second world called High Fidelity, which he still runs now. He also did a coin offering, HFC. And, he's just seen this. He's had this vision for a long time. But again, we're finally now at the moment where the technology is kind of caught up.
Right.
There are enough devices out there now where being in a social VR environment doesn't feel like you're just alone in a room waiting for someone to show up.
So do you think we have crossed that threshold where there is enough critical mass?
There's something to do to get started.
Okay.
And the reason it's important to get started is that there are going to be sort of multiple worlds. And if we do it correctly, and as consumers, we demand that they are all interconnected, interoperable, that we kind of bring self-sovereign identity. I'm just throwing all these terms out, which I know are sort of confusing, but imagine you have an avatar, which is your representative of you in the digital landscape.
Right.
You have your public persona, which is your social media.
So the key is that mechanics should be kind of similar to the real world, so to speak, right? So the social mechanics.
Well, and that the openness and permission sets and interoperability should, I wouldn't even say mirror the internet, because it's taken us a really long time to, if you look,
and we still haven't mastered it.
Yeah, if you look behind the curtain, there's like people with duct tape and don't look behind the curtain, it's all kind of a mess back there.
And then in the dark room, there's a
between
dark
like
web.
IPv6 and IPv4,
Yeah.
and, it's just like, what? And the keys are missing, and so, but look at the mistakes we made in when we have walled gardens, some of the mistakes we've made,
Right.
and that we really need an open metaverse, we need open XR, we need open AI, we need open blockchains, and this is an imperative for us to move
so
forward.
Oculus is probably not going to be the platform for
He's
Metaverse.
going to want it to be,
But it's going to be tough because it's closed ecosystem.
well, and not everyone's going to want to sign in with their Facebook.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Their
it's
last
just-
year's move was
It's kind of
pretty
the
damaging for them.
antithesis of what the metaverse is supposed to
Yeah.
be. It is supposed to be this open and accessible world. And if we build a world that mirrors the digital divide that we have in real life, shame on us. I mean, this is ours to lose right now.
Yeah.
Like,
if we build a metaverse with factions and races and stuff like that,
then we've lost at life, and we deserve to be overrun by AI.
yeah, I mean, yeah. Then we failed
really,
us
if you can't build your fantasy world
from zero
and
without
not turn
all
it
this
into
BS.
dystopia,
Then what are you doing? Yeah.
it's your fault.
No, yeah. Okay,
It's
so
our fault.
So how like it's a generic question, but how close are we? Do you think to that?
I think
uncanny valley?
it's I am actually just about to release a post. I was going to call it "Shut Up About the Metaverse," because everyone's like, "Oh, it's metaverse," so like Zuckerberg just utters the word, and now it's like a thing. But then I can't really call a blog post about the metaverse "Shut Up About the Metaverse."
Yeah.
So now it's called "The Metaverse is a Journey, Not a Destination."
Okay.
It is about what is this next evolution? How do we merge the physical in the digital and use technology to connect us as humans and not separate us? So that's for me the goal.
And there's an important caveat that we all need to keep in mind that with any disruptive technology, with any disruptive idea, most of the projects are a failure. And it's normal.
Yeah.
Just like with NFT, like everybody's talking about NFT right now, but majority of the projects will fail.
Yeah.
And majority of the investments put into NFT will be losses.
Yeah.
Which is okay.
Yeah.
Like we
we
need
have
to be prepared.
That's another big opportunity in the metaverse, is like, let's not build an economic construct and a system of value that's based on what we value today, because clearly what we value today is not working for us.
Is at least changing. Like we've seen it evolving and changing into something different.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't hold the candle anymore. Like
Yeah.
it's just,
it's
not working.
I think, NFTs will find their place. And I think when they start to also add value, they're not just collectibles, right? Because they're, again...
Some projects already do that. Like, and I've seen it and I
that's
like
the
it.
promise,
Like if it has smart contract behind it, then it makes sense.
Then it's useful.
It makes perfect sense.
I mean, CryptoPunks, it's like we're going to find this balance of kind of false economy versus value systems, and I think that we need a system of value that is simply tied to the people who are involved in the transaction. And I may sell you this bottle of water,
right?
Just because you're a good person and you have the ability to pay more than somebody else, so maybe I'll charge you a little bit more and I'll tell you that and you'll be okay with it.
Right.
Because then that will support me selling this to somebody else who doesn't. And
if I know that, I might be okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, so that we can start to change the balance of, maybe there are data points that are more important in the value chain than just how much can I get for this product. And, and it's sort of anathema to some of the things we talk about in entrepreneurship. But, what if the data points are that you actually have a very high, kind of sustainability score. So the things that you're doing in your life to reduce your own carbon footprint in your community, like that's valuable.
You bring more value to the world,
So then I want to reward you for that. And so you'll get, again, it's like, let's take other data points than just profit and loss.
Yeah. We're just scratching the surface. I mean, we don't know what blockchain will turn into, 5 years, 10 years from now. We don't know. We're scratching the surface, and I like the general trend.
Yeah.
all of this is going. All right. Now we go towards the light segment of our talk. Who's your favorite comic book hero, heroine?
Oh my gosh. You know, it's funny. I didn't really grow up with comic books.
Really?
Like, who are my favorite? I'm trying to think of actors. I used to love, it's so funny, I used to love Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie. Even though they were now, like, you could not make that show. Women would lose their minds. They'd be like, oh my God, this scantily clad, like, blonde woman. But I liked this idea of, like, kind of having these magical powers.
Right.
Because we all have these magical powers. And it's not as obvious as what they were displaying, you know, in those two shows. But there's a real kind of mystical element to our universe. Mm-hmm. That we have no conception. Like, we just don't have an understanding of it because we're not really, some of us are trying.
We're not in that horizon.
But I mean, it's not even space, it's dimension. You mentioned dimension. Like, there are dimensions that could be that, you know, this is not it, right? We are not the most evolved creature in the universe.
We're operating in a very narrow, you know, field spectrum of frequencies. That's it.
Right. So, like, you know, I'm intrigued by what it would take to unlock some of that.
Right.
And I think that at least technology can augment our lives. And, you know, if we start to, again, be more proactive and start to actually kind of put the synapses back together, right? Yeah. And find other paths and other ways of thinking. I feel like there's going to be an incredible outcome.
That's the journey for any person. Yeah. Like, that's the evolution. You need to find something in yourself, new connections, you know, between the cells, the brain cells. You need to find them. Yeah. Any books you'd like to recommend our viewers, or the books that are important for you or interesting?
There's a really good book. I'm not going to lie, it's kind of a hard read because it's very dense. Like, you're going to have to read it like 5 times. It's called The Case Against Reality. Okay. And it speaks to that everything that we know is a construct. Okay. Right? This has a name, and it's universally recognized by all of us because we've given it a name, but you gave it a different name than we gave it. And so it's just a name, right? And then this shape, like, the way I perceive it, I don't even know if you're looking at this. It's like we have this
even
notion
the color.
We have the notion of colorblindness, right? And then I actually just met a woman who said, I forget the name of the disease, but that she is unable to draw pictures in her mind. Wow. So if you said close your eyes, and now I want you to picture the bottle of water, she's unable to do that. Wow. But no, this has only been discovered in like 2013 because no one knew they had it because they didn't know they couldn't do it, right?
And nobody was talking about it.
Right, and so, you know, we have this perception that we know things when really we kind of don't know anything. So if we don't know anything and everything we do know is a construct, what would happen if we all got together and we built a whole new construct?
And agreed that this construct is different, right?
And it was like, okay, that there's some of it that's different because we make room for that, because in the metaverse you can have all kinds of worlds. But I bet the world that everyone wanted to hang out with, it would be the proverbial kitchen at a dinner party.
Yeah.
It would be...
with abundance of everything,
It would be this central piece where it's like the things that we love, the people we care about, creativity, music, art, culture. Yeah. And I hope somebody brings the wine into the Venn diagram.
Oh, we're going to bring our wine. Like, I mean, we're going to bring everything that we have to that proverbial kitchen. Right. All right. And that kind of brings us to the final segment of the interview. And, you know, when I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of American shows here. And then when I got exposed to internet, I started looking at the American TV shows, and one of the favorite ones that I had was Inside the Actor's Studio. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Yeah. And James Lipton was one of the favorite TV personalities of mine, and he always ended his interviews with the questionnaire about Bernard Pivot, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, rest in peace to James Lipton. And I kind of borrowed that questionnaire and adjusted it to our needs as well. So we're going to finish our interview and conversation with that questionnaire. Okay. There's going to be 10 questions. Whatever comes up to you, comes to your mind, just answer. So let's begin. What's your favorite word?
Adoration.
Okay. What's your least favorite word?
Fungible.
Fungible.
I hate that word. Who thought non-fungible? First of all, no one even knows what an NFT is, and then you say, oh, it's non-fungible token, and they're like, well, what?
Funge?
Like, it's a terrible word.
It is. Now that I think about it.
Just call it an irrefutable token. Fungible.
Okay.
It's a bad word.
So what inspires you? What turns you on?
Oh, wow. Art, technology, and having just great conversations with people. Yeah.
So, and what turns you off? What discourages you?
People who are small-minded and angry all the time for...
Bitter, angry.
Yeah. Just fundamentally unhappy.
Got it. Now, what's your favorite curse word?
Fuckity fuck. Because it's fuck, everyone says fuck, but like when in something, when I just totally cannot believe something, that's what comes out.
What sound do you love?
The sound of kids, really young kids giggling and babies giggling.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's like, you can't help but smile. You just hear it and you just smile. Okay,
I'm gonna send you the best sound.
Oh, the good one?
Yeah. My daughter has the best giggle in the world.
Oh, I want to hear
Both daughters.
I want to hear. I'm gonna make it a ringtone for you.
Yeah. So what's the sound that you don't like or hate?
I would say it's the sound of, I hate nails on a blackboard, but I think it's the sound of heartbreak.
The sound. Wow. That's interesting. It's an interesting concept. I'm not going to ask how this sounds, but
when you hear something in someone's voice,
right,
where it's so detrimental,
right,
that they're different and their voice is different, and the timbre of there is science. Actually, there's a company here that is measuring it. But yeah, you can actually measure it now. But people can hear it.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. In another universe, what do you think? What profession would you pick up?
I'd probably be a space pilot.
Space pilot.
Yeah, I'd probably be a space pilot because I like to go places anyway. Actually, no, but it's probably a space passenger. Yeah, I think it would be space passenger. And I would have to probably find some way to pay for that. So maybe so when Virgin bought its first plane and went across from London to New York City, it was one of its very first flights. Right. And I booked it because I wanted to be on it. And instead of having, people like listening to their Walkmans for music or whatever, which you used to plug in, it would just be like a couple of music stations.
You were present.
They actually had buskers. So there are buskers are people in the street who kind of play music for money. So they actually would take really good artists.
Wow.
Who they found literally on the street.
On the street.
And they would just kind of walk up and down the aisle. So I would do the same so that I could, pay just to do this for a living. But instead I would talk about this like positive, amazing future and ask questions and tell jokes and like engage the audience. So.
What profession would you never try?
Oh boy. There's a couple. I think I would not like to be a pawnbroker.
Pawnbroker, okay.
Because it's just kind of like it's sort of like just the exchange of sadness.
Yeah.
Just like someone like
and capitalizing
had this
on it.
and they like couldn't afford it, but now it's like they have to give it away, and then someone else. I don't know. It's just
And a final question: in 100 years, when we're not here, what would you like people to say? Hey, remember Amy Peck? ...
Well, first of all, I'm not going anywhere, so I'll still be here.
In 100 years?
Yeah.
All right.
I'll still be here. So I would like each and every one of you to come up and introduce yourself and tell me your story.
Nice. That's the most original answer to that question that I've got. Nice. Thank you very much. And I have several reasons why I do this. And I've been doing this since the beginning of 2020. And I've been wanting to do this for years before that. And there are several reasons. Number one, I looked around and I saw people like you, people that I call lemonade makers, like people that make lemonade out of, bad lemons and sweet lemonade. So people that take adversity and turn it into opportunity. And when I saw people like you, I was like, people need to know these people. People need to be inspired by these people. Number two, I want to get to know with people like you, you know what I mean? And I want to learn. And number three, I want to, you know, when I looked around, I realized that there is not enough gratitude in my life, you know what I mean? And not only in my life, around me as well. Like, we don't say thank you enough to each other for a lot of reasons, you know, objective and subjective. So, and I'm trying to make interviews with people that I probably have to say thank you to, or will have to say thank you to. And I got a feeling that I need to say thank you to you for a lot of things that you've done for this ecosystem, because I've heard stories. I've spoken to Colin, I've spoken to other people, and I know the things that you do for this ecosystem, and I'd like to thank you for all of this. I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to wish that you succeed in everything and fulfill whatever you want to fulfill in this ecosystem and beyond, and in the metaverse. And I think that in 100 years, you definitely will be alive and well, and you will be definitely getting our names and our stories down at the notepad. So thank you very much for this honesty, for this roller coaster, and for just being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a lovely conversation. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. And we're going to see you in the next one.